Me, Cornyn, Blumenthal, you.
I'm jabbling, by the way.
Ready to go. Ready?
Showtime. Richard's talking to his admiring fan base.
Fan clubs. All right, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming here today. I'm proud to be joined alongside many of my esteemed colleagues, including Senator Cornyn and Senator Blumenthal, as well as my colleagues in the House, Congressman Gottheimer, Malliotakis, Goldberg, LaLota, and many others. With courageous families and victims affected by the horrific acts of terror, including 9/11, the 1983 Beirut embassy bombing, the 1996 Khobar Towers attack, and the recent October 7th terrorist attacks on Israel, among others. I'd like to give special thanks to many, including Angela Mistrulli, for all of her incredible work in helping pull this together. Angela lost her father on 9/11 and has dedicated herself to working to help all victims of terrorism, but especially our brave 9/11 families. Thank you, Angela, and I'm honored to consider you a friend. Together, we're all here to announce the introduction of the American Victims of Terrorism Compensation Act. This legislation has been a long time coming and will help ensure the viability of the United States Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund for years to come. There are countless families who have suffered from state-sponsored terrorism, and it calls for immediate and unwavering action. The American Victims of Terrorism Compensation Act answers that call, taking concrete steps to provide support to victims and families of victims alike. The bill ensures annual payouts from the U.S. Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund, helping ensure that victims and their families have a steady source of support. It also improves and expands the funding streams into the fund to ensure that the fund is being adequately supported on an annual basis. But we're also requiring enhanced annual reports to Congress and a comprehensive GAO report every 3 years to ensure that the fund remains solvent and is being administered correctly. To that end, we're also doubling the personnel tasked with administering the fund, which will help deliver timely and effective assistance to those who rely on it the most. I'm deeply proud to be spearheading this bipartisan initiative to help those who have been victim to terror. It reaffirms our commitment to support these families and ensure they receive the support they deserve. And I thank all of you for your support, your courage, and your unwavering resilience in the face of devastating loss. Together, we will get this bill across the finish line. And with that, I'm honored to introduce my co-lead and colleague in the Senate, Senator John Cornyn. Thank you.
Well, I too want to express my gratitude to all of the families here who I'm sure wish you did not have to be here. But as a result of a terrorist attack, you've lost your loved ones, and that's the reason we are here. From September the 11th, 2001 to October the 7th in Israel, just a short time ago, Americans lost their lives to terrorist attacks. And the goal, of course, as Representative Lawler has said, is to make sure that the state-sponsored terrorist victims compensation fund is adequately funded. So in a way, this bill that we've introduced here today, the American Victims of Terrorism Compensation Act, is to make sure that the promise of justice or some small semblance of justice in terms of compensation is available to these families and is not a false promise. This will help ensure that every family here and all eligible Americans who have been victims of state-sponsored terrorism receive the compensation that they are rightfully owed. Any terrorist defendant who refuses to pay for their despicable acts will, of course, be held accountable in a multitude of ways. And that is, of course, to the fullest extent of the law. But this particular law that we are introducing today, this bill, when it becomes a law, will require the Department of Justice to fund the Terrorist Compensation Fund in a way they have not in the past, to make sure that the promise of compensation is real and not illusory. We all know that terrorism is evil in its clearest form, and we will not rest until justice for these families is done.
Thank you, Senator. Now, I'd like to introduce Senator Blumenthal of Connecticut, one of our co-leads.
Thank you. Even on the House side. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, all of you. This is really an important day. In fact, you could say it is seismically important to have Republicans and Democrats, the House and the Senate, united for this cause. And this bill is overdue. It is long overdue, but it took a lot of work to get to this point, because we wanted justice, not just in words, but in action, for survivors and families that have suffered so much in the loss of loved ones. And we can never bring back those loved ones. There's no way that money will compensate you. But it is about simple decency and justice for families who have stood strong for themselves and for others, because this cause is not only about compensating victims of terrorism, it is about deterring terrorism in the future and saying to any who would do us harm, we will take care of people when they are victims of terrorism. It does justice to crime victims, and it does justice to the entire 9/11 community. That's why it's supported by the majority of 9/11 victims and groups representing them. I just returned from a trip to Israel, literally days ago. Talked to families there that have lost loved ones and who still have hostages, American hostages. And I promise them we will get this done. And to the 9/11 families, we will get it done, because we have an obligation to you and to all who may be victims of terrorism that we will get it done. What it means is, right away, about $2 billion, new money for the fund, and it also means money for the crime victims. They, too, need to be respected. But right away, $2 billion, and then a reliable, certain funding stream, not dependent on the whims of Congress, not relying on an uncertain source, but a reliable stream of funding from the Asset Forfeiture Fund. That's what asset forfeiture should do when there are excess amounts of money. And as a former U.S. attorney who has been involved in seizing assets, my feeling always was they should compensate victims of crime, and that's what we're doing here. Victims of terrorism, victims of crime. So I just want to thank my fellow co-sponsors on both sides of the aisle. We should be doing this more often. Has a good feeling to it. And I want to particularly thank my colleague in the Senate, John Cornyn. He has been a steadfast partner in a long journey. And on this issue and others, I hope we can continue to work together to make sure that terrorism is made a thing of the past, but most important, when it happens, we keep faith with the victims of terrorism. That's what today is about. And back to you, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Senator. Thank you, Senator Blumenthal. And now introduce my co-lead in the House, Representative Josh Gottheimer of New Jersey.
Thank you so much. First, I just want to thank, again, I know this has been made, but we can't thank the people behind us enough for what you've been through and that you've stayed with it and kept all of our feet to the fire until we get this done. So thank you to all of you. Thank you so much. And to the senators and to my colleagues, my bipartisan colleagues, and Tommy, thank you so much for your leadership as well, and Andrea and Terry and Megan. There's so many people who've been part of this. I think the big point today that you've heard over and over again is this is just about doing the right thing, right? If you're a victim of terror and a family and a loved one, you've been through so much, not just in losing your loved one or your family member, but then the struggles that come after losing them. And how difficult it can be on your families, on making sure that you're made whole and that you can go forward every day. And this is really about that compensation, whether you're a 9/11 family, and it was 24 years ago nearly where terrorists murdered 3,000 people on 9/11, including 750 people from New Jersey, the worst terror attack on American soil. And then just more recently on October 7th, where we lost so many Americans, 45, and we have others who still need to come home, including Don Alexander, who's the last living American, we believe, who must come home, and many of us are fighting every day to make sure he comes home. But there's so many victims who deserve compensation. They deserve to get the help that Senator Blumenthal was just talking about, to make sure that we do right by them, and there is no reason why this fund shouldn't get the resources it needs to help people and the support who need the help. This just little small thing that we can do as a country to do right by victims of terror and their families. That's why I'm so proud to be helping lead this legislation. It's why we're not going to stop until it gets done. We're going to work day and night to make sure everyone gets the support they need, and we stand up to terror wherever it rears its ugly head, because in the greatest country in the world, the United States of America should never allow it, and we should make sure we fight it wherever we see it every single day. Thanks so much, and God bless.
Thank you, Congressman Gottheimer. I'd now like to introduce Andrea Portnoy, who will read a statement from John and Rachel Goldberg Poland, Hirsch Goldberg Poland's parents, one of the 50 Americans killed as a result of the October 7th massacre.
Thank you to all the members for your steadfast support for this effort. It is a heavy privilege that I have to read this statement that was given to me by John Poland and Rachel Goldberg Poland. Hirsch's picture is seared into our minds as the tragic reminder that terrorism does not stop, and that's one of the why this bill is so important, and we appreciate all the members recognizing that. After our son Hirsch was brutally kidnapped, maimed, starved, tortured, and murdered in a tunnel deep under Gaza, we joined the unfortunate community of nearly 50 Americans killed and hundreds more injured and taken hostage in the October 7th Hamas massacre and its aftermath, and the tens of thousands of other American victims of state-sponsored terror. We are grateful that Congress saw fit to establish the U.S. Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund in 2015 to offer some measure of relief to this unfortunate cohort. We now add our voices and call for Congress to pass the American Victims of Terrorism Compensation Act into law as soon as possible to ensure that the U.S. Victims of State-Sponsored Terrorism Fund is funded and that it makes the consistent and meaningful distributions Congress intended to help American victims of state-sponsored terror. We particularly thank Senators Cornyn and Blumenthal and Representatives Lawler, Gottheimer, Goldman, and Malliotakis for their sponsorship of this bill, and we call on all fellow members to join in this sponsorship. The AVTCA is clearly not political. It is neither Republican nor is it Democrat. It is solely and singularly American. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrea, and thank you to John and Rachel. I now introduce my esteemed colleague from New York and co-lead Congresswoman Nicole Malliotakis.
I want to thank Congressman Lawler for his leadership. As New Yorkers, we understand what so many of these victims have gone through, and we represent so many people who have lost their loved ones or to this day are suffering with 9/11 illnesses or suffering with grief from losing loved ones in various terrorist attacks. The U.S. VSST fund has failed to operate as Congress originally intended, leading to repeat frustration and heartbreak for the families of state-sponsored terrorism, like the ones that are standing with us today. I'm proud that this is a bipartisan group, a bicameral group, that is working on behalf of victims of terrorism by co-sponsoring this legislation to right a wrong. And although financial compensation cannot bring back their loved ones, families in my district and across the country will be able to rebuild their lives with the funds that they are entitled to through their judgments. In 2022, I worked tirelessly to draft and pass a lump sum catch-up payment in an effort to compensate widows and children of 9/11 who had been unfairly excluded from the fund in prior years. And we worked together in a bipartisan fashion to make that law. Now, our American Victims of Terror Compensation Act will fulfill Congress's promise to never forget and to solidify our nation's support for those who have been scarred by horrific acts of terrorists and terrorism against our country. I thank everyone for being here today, and we will continue to advocate to make sure that we right this wrong and that this legislation does what Congress intended to do and that we support these victims of terrorism. Thank you very much.
I'd now like to introduce Tommy Smith, FDNY. Tommy lost his dad, firefighter Kevin Smith, who was part of Hazmat Squad 288 on 9/11. Tommy?
Good afternoon, esteemed members of Congress, government officials, most importantly, citizens of the United States. Nearly 8,658 days ago, I put on a fire helmet for the first time, embarking in one of the most honorable and rewarding careers a person can choose. Just 6 months into my journey, 8,388 days ago, from today, will forever be etched in history and my mind. My love, dedication for this profession, for my country, were tested in ways I can never have imagined. Tragic events of September 11th, 2001 changed the course of my life and the lives of countless others across our nation. My father, Kevin Joseph Smith, was my greatest inspiration, a man who dedicated over 23 years to FDNY. He was among the first to respond in the North Tower on that fateful morning. Before 9/11, my father played a critical role in preparing our city for the unthinkable. The first World Trade Center bombing, he was appointed to the mayor's office to develop New York City's first terrorism attack plan. Yet, despite all preparations, nothing could have prepared us for the devastating attack that took my father's life and the lives of so many. Sorry. As we searched through the rubble, I learned that both my father and my brother, Brian Smith, were among those trapped. Brian, FDNY firefighter paramedic, had been assigned to triage center. When the towers collapsed, he and his partner took cover under a wooden table in the 1010 firehouse. Miraculously, he was found alive beneath the debris and rushed to the hospital. Today, he serves as a lieutenant in the Lynchburg, Virginia Police Department. My father, however, was never found. To this day, his remains have not been identified. For weeks, we dug through the wreckage with bare hands, with 5-gallon buckets to carry away debris, desperately searching for survivors and recovering the remains of those lost. Now, 23 years later, the effects of that day haunt us. I recently retired from my career as a firefighter, but not without cost. I've been diagnosed with 7 certified 9/11 related illnesses, a harsh reality that many of us first responders face. Despite the passage of time, we continue our fight for justice that the government made a promise to never forget, to care for the victims and the families, and to ensure that those infected by terrorism receive the support they deserve. The fund was created with this promise in mind. However, that promise has yet to be fully fulfilled. I want to express my deepest gratitude to Congressman Lawler, Congresswoman Malliotakis, and especially my district representative, Congressman LaLota, for their unwavering support, as well as the rest of their staff. So today we stand here and demand the swift, unopposed passage of the AVTCA. This legislation is not about politics. It is about justice. It's about ensuring that all victims receive the fair and consistent compensation they were promised. It's about making sure funds meant to support these victims are properly allocated and protected. For too long, we have fought battles that should never have been necessary. Those who have already endured unimaginable loss should not have to continue fighting for what was promised to them. Our government leaders took an oath to serve and protect the American people. The commitment must extend to the victims of state-sponsored terrorism and their families. This is not a matter of party lines. It's a matter of principle, humanity, and doing what is right. We are calling on our government to uphold its word and deliver the justice and the support that has been long overdue. The time to act is now. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce my colleague from New York, Congressman LaLota.
Thanks, Mike. And thanks, Tommy, for sharing that with us. Tommy and I were talking just a minute ago, and he said to me, hey, thanks for being here. And I want to thank him for his service, just recently retired. His family's full of cops and firemen and represent the true salty grit that it takes to be a New York or New Jersey person, because they gave it all for their jobs. I think back to that September day 24 years ago like it was yesterday. I was stationed in San Diego. I was getting home from a deployment. I watched those horrific events unfold on TV, not knowing if buddies I went to high school with, family members, and everybody in between would make it out okay. And many of them did, because of the grit, the perseverance, the selflessness of folks like from Tommy's family and other cops and firemen who ran towards danger to help other Americans in need. So when Tommy said, hey, thanks for being here is the minimum. Introducing this bill is important to justice, to holding the perpetrators of all terrorist attacks against the United States accountable, to provide some relief, only some relief, to families who have endured all this terrorism and grief for all these years. Being here and introducing this bill is good, but we together need to work to ensure this bill actually gets it to our respective floors. You got some powerful folks beside and behind me, bicameral, bipartisan, folks who are going to work like hell to ensure that legacies like Tommy's family are upheld, that their sacrifice will have been not for anything, that we will ensure that we fight tooth and nail to get this across the finish line. We need to hold the terrorists accountable. We need to provide relief to the families. I'm proud to join in this effort. I want to say thanks especially to my friend Mike Lawler for his leadership in getting us to this point, but this ought to be just the beginning. The fight is just beginning, and we will never forget. God bless.
Thank you, Nick. I'd now like to introduce Andrea Twine, who lost her dad, a sergeant in the U.S. Army, in the 1983 embassy bombings in Beirut, Lebanon. Andrea?
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea Twine, and I would like to thank you all for the opportunity to share my story as to why this bill is so important to me and so many others. And thanks to all of the members of Congress who are here today working to provide the help that we so desperately need. My father was a sergeant in the U.S. Army. He was a career soldier with 18 years of service and a veteran of the Vietnam War. He was a devoted dad and played a huge role in my life. Even when he was assigned away from home, he was always in touch and made sure to keep up with how I was doing and all of my activities. It wasn't so easy back then, but my dad always found a way. He would write me letters and send cards, and we would speak on the phone whenever we could. My dad was sent to Lebanon for what was supposed to be a short duty assignment. He hoped to be able to retire from the military soon and start a career in the United States. Less than 3 weeks before he was scheduled to return home, my father was killed in the 1983 bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Beirut. I was only 14. I later learned that my dad and a fellow soldier were at the embassy eating lunch and checking their mail when that car bomb exploded. My father was trapped and died under that rubble when the building collapsed all around him. Losing my father at such a very young age was very difficult, and I have struggled for years to come to terms with it. Even as I've gotten older and was able to process what happened, so much of my life has been affected. I have never fully recovered. How could I? Not a day goes by without me thinking about my dad and what I lost in my life. I can still see myself opening that door that morning before school, seeing a serious-looking man in an army uniform, and immediately knowing that my life was about to crumble around me. It is a moment I can never forget. By creating the U.S. VSST Fund, Congress provided me the first real chance at getting any justice for losing my father, by holding accountable those who committed this terrible act and providing the help I need to move on. I'm sure many victims and their families feel the same way. However, unless Congress chooses to act and fund the fund by passing this bill, victims and their families from so many attacks will continue to be forgotten and be left only with the scars of the worst moments of our lives. Thank you all for letting me tell my story today, and I hope that hearing the stories of all the victims will remind Congress of what terrorists did to us simply for being Americans. And we need Congress's help to avoid being forgotten. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. I would now like to introduce Terry Strada, a widow of Tom Strada, National Chair of 9/11 Families United.
Thank you. Thank you. Hello, and thank you for being here today. Terrorism does exactly what it is intended to do. It terrorizes you to your core. I have witnessed firsthand the profound pain and suffering a terrorist attack inflicts on those left behind. My children were 7, 4, and 4 days old on September 11th, and like everyone here today, they carry the emotional scars in their psyches and in their hearts. The AVTCA will provide meaningful financial support for those left behind to navigate a world without their loved one, and for injured survivors whose physical scars are a continual reminder of the horrors they have endured. I am honored to be a part of this incredible coalition of Americans bound by our collective grief and experiences, working as one for a better outcome for all. On behalf of my late husband, Tom, and the thousands of families that couldn't be here today, thank you to our indomitable leaders. Your unwavering dedication to our plight is deeply appreciated, and I implore all of Congress to stand with us and support this important piece of legislation. And we brought with us today over 3,000 signatures, 3,000 family members that couldn't be here today, but they are here with us in spirit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Terry. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague from New York, Congresswoman Laura Gillen.
Thank you to Congressman Lawler, Congresswoman Malliotakis, Congressman Gottheimer, and Congressman Goldman, and Congressman LaLota for their leadership on this bipartisan bill, and for the advocates who bravely shared their stories today. Over 20,000 Americans have had their lives fundamentally changed by heinous acts of terror. Until the creation of the U.S. VSST Fund, there was no way for those who were injured by terrorist attacks or the families who lost loved ones to obtain justice. We're here today to fix the gaps in the fund and ensure that American victims of terrorism receive meaningful relief. This is a family matter on Long Island and in my district. Likely every single person living there knows someone who was impacted by 9/11 if they weren't themselves. It was the darkest day in our nation's history. With the passage of this bill, more than 13,000 spouses, children, parents, and siblings of the nearly 3,000 innocents murdered on 9/11 will see some measure of justice. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this important bipartisan bill, and I will continue to work with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to serve the 9/11 community in Congress. Thank you all.
Thank you, Laura. Now introduce Megan Copeland, who lost her father and brother in the 2016 Nice, France truck attack.
Hello, I'm Megan Copeland, and I'm here with my brother Austin. Thank you to all the members of Congress who are leading this bill and helping to get it passed into law, including our Senator Cornyn from Texas. July 14th, 2016, we were all on a family vacation in France, celebrating a few family birthdays. We were all having a blast being all together as a family, and after a fireworks show, we walked along the promenade. My little brother Brody, he really wanted candy from the candy stand. So we all stood right behind him, watching him pick out pieces of candy, and moments later, our lives changed forever.
A huge commercial truck came barreling down the promenade, right through the crowd and toward the candy stand. My dad screamed for me to grab my sister out of the way and dove in to try to save my brother. My little brother died in my arms instantly, and my sister was able to get my dad to the hospital where he shortly died there afterwards. In a flash, half of our family was gone and taken from us. That night, the Syrian-sponsored ISIS terrorist murdered 86 people and injured hundreds more.
Yeah, ever since the attack, we have struggled with grief, guilt, nightmares. We've had flashbacks of screams, tears, bloodshed. Like, they continue to haunt us. Not having my dad and my brother in our life has left a gaping hole for us. There are times when we both struggled and didn't know, like, if we were really going to make it. We've leaned on each other the best we can. And so we've heard that Congress created a fund to help victims like us get our lives back on track and ultimately hold these terrorists accountable for their horrific acts of violence. And so we thought maybe that there could be some help for us. But as you all know, the fund has not worked in the way that Congress intended, and we really, really need your help to make things right. We are some of the newest victims of the fund, and we're really struggling. But we also know that there are victims here today and around the country who have been struggling for decades, trying to put their lives back together. So we beg Congress to help us and all the American victims and their families by passing this bill into law and to helping fulfill the promise that Congress made 10 years ago to all American victims of state-sponsored terrorism. Please show victims like us that our government is on our side. And at the same time, we're sending a clear signal to state sponsors of terrorism that justice will prevail and that their crimes will not go unanswered. This is America, and America takes care of its own. So please take care of us.
Thank you both. I'd now like to introduce Jane Sisset from Jacksonville, Florida. She was a passenger aboard TWA Flight 847 when it was hijacked by Hezbollah terrorists in 1985. Jane?
Hi there, thank you. We've been down this path with these wonderful people that have tried to help us all in getting awareness brought to the state victims of terrorism. I have to reflect a little bit today about listening to all these stories. And for me, we're a family. So it's been really touching for me to come back here and work with everyone here to try and have Congress and the Senate work together. This is truly an American issue. Terrorism is something that until you've gone through an event like many of these families have, where they've lost loved ones or personally gone through having your freedom taken away, it's something that's very difficult to wrap your arms around. So I would express my thanks and gratitude towards the people that have stayed on top of this, and hope that as a team, which I think we all are on that team, that we can make a difference and that we can get this over the finish line. So thank you. Thank you.
Lastly, I would like to introduce Bob Chicca from San Diego, California. Bob was a Marine serving aboard the USS Pueblo in 1968 when it was attacked by North Korea. He was held hostage and tortured along with 81 other crew members for 11 months. Bob?
Good afternoon. I'd like to thank both the House and Senate for the support they've given this bill in the past. It's just not quite running as well as it should, so we're looking for current support to pass this bill. And with the newest people being here, I'm probably one of the oldest, seeing it's 57 years ago that I got shot up and imprisoned in North Korea. And we've been working. We're just getting old, and we can use some of the help and support that has not worked its way through the way it was intended originally. So we appreciate your help in the past and look forward to the passage of this bill soon. Thank you.
Well, again, thank you to all the victims and their families for being here today. This is about righting a wrong. It is about fulfilling our commitment to those who have been victim to terrorism. This is essential that we pass this legislation and fund the fund once and for all so that the victims of terrorism are justly compensated. So thank you again for being here. Thank you to my colleagues in the House, in the Senate. We will get this done. With that, happy to take any questions.
Address the particular timing of the reintroduction of this. We know that it kind of comes on the heels of the White House reversing cuts to the 9/11 health fund. Could you address that? And is the timing of this anything in particular?
The timing has nothing to do with that. I was proud to work with my colleagues from New York to reach out to the White House and address the concerns with respect to the World Trade Center Health Fund and make sure that there was no impact. The White House worked directly with us on that and quickly rectified the situation, so I appreciate that. We have been working on this legislation for almost 2 years. And there is a lot that goes into legislation like this. There are obviously, different considerations. We are trying to make sure that everyone is supported and that the fund justly compensates them. And this is something that we have worked in a bipartisan way to get done. We had introduced it last Congress, made progress. We worked through some of the concerns that various groups had. There are still things to continually work through as we make our way to the floor. But we are fully committed to getting this legislation passed and making sure that the victims are compensated. That is what it is about. Nothing more, nothing less. We want to get this done for them and their families. And so that is why, we're proud to introduce it this week, to begin the process of advancing it through both the House and the Senate.
As you moved along with this legislation?
Well, there's been concern from the crime victims to make sure that some of the funding did not take away from them. We've addressed all of those concerns. The crime victims have come out in support of this legislation. We're still working through with some of the other 9/11 families on concerns that they have. Some people who were not in the initial fund. So, again, this to me is very personal. We have all been impacted by families who have fallen victim to terror, whether it's 9/11 or other terrorist attacks, including now October 7th. And we are trying to rectify the situation and help everybody. Anytime you're legislating, you're not going to make everybody happy, but we're trying to work through the challenges to make sure we get the bill across the finish line.
Have you talked to the White House? Is this something that the White House is willing to sign if it does get passed?
I would suspect if it gets passed, they will absolutely sign it. I know the president is fully committed to supporting those that are victim of terrorism, whether it's 9/11 or October 7th or any other terrorist attack. So, we will work closely with the White House, with leadership, to get this bill across the finish line. Any other questions? Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.